Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Podriplegics podcast. This is a very special episode for me. We have a very special guest. But before I get to introducing him, I always got to go through these housekeeping items. So let's kick them off. We are sponsored by the Arizona Spinal Cord Injury Association. That is azspinal.org. You can reach them at 602-507-4209 with any questions at any time. Eric will always answer the phone. Call him at 4 in the morning, please. This podcast can be found on YouTube. It can be found on azspinal.org/podcast. You can always find us on Facebook and also in the groups of Arizona Spinal Cord Injury Friends. You can also find us audio on Spotify and iTunes. Click subscribe. It helps us. That in turn will help you. Everybody wins. Don, Eric, and myself have 100+ years combined of living with a disability. We are not medical professionals. I repeat, we are not medical professionals. If you are having medical issues, please contact your doctor or call 911. Explicit warning for mature language and content, mostly by Eric and Don. Don's got a foul mouth.
Oh, yeah.
So don't sue us if we are incorrect with what we are saying. We are here to just speak our truths, tell our stories and our experiences. If they're not the same as yours and or incorrect, don't sue us. If you're going to sue anybody, direct that right towards Eric. Eric has all the monies and
Money bags.
Money. Wait, whoa. Okay.
he loves to be sued. That's his favorite thing to do is be sued. So if
not
you're gonna
really.
sue somebody, sue Eric.
Just a little add-on. We may not be professionals. However, I have access to a vast amount of resources so that I can always direct you. So if you do decide to give me a call, give me a shout out, I may be able to help get you to where you need to go or give you some additional ideas. So
Between Eric and Don, they have a ton of resources to help you with transitioning or into being disabled or with almost anything you can think of. They probably have resources for it. So feel free to reach out, contact us, leave comments, messages, however you want to do it. We check them all. We'll look at them. We'll try to get to you and help you out. That's what we're here for.
Yep.
Anyways, all right, on to the show. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Tyler Ray Helms. He is my brother. He's a recent law school grad from Stanford University. He went as undergrad from Arizona State.
Congratulations. That's a pretty big deal, actually.
Yeah.
Congrats.
He studied some disability law. He's on here to kind of talk to everybody about what it's like to be an advocate, what it's like to be a brother, what it's like to be somebody who's cared for an individual with a disability. There's a lot of things that we're going to try to talk to him about in the short amount of time that we have. So let's just get it started. Tyler, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, of course.
Yeah. Tyler was a very, very young kid when I got in my auto accident. So I'm not sure how much he remembers from before or now after, but maybe Tyler, you can start off by telling us a little bit about yourself. I know I kind of introduced you a little bit, but you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what you think you can bring to the conversation, or maybe even what disabilities how they've shaped your mindset.
Sure. So, like you said, I just graduated from Stanford Law School about 2 weeks ago. So still adjusting to all that. I've never not been a student, so kind of scared for what comes next. But
it only gets worse.
So I've heard. So at Stanford, I studied, like you said, I took a class in disability law, did a pretty good amount of research into disability law, specifically into some environmental justice and disability law intersectionality between folks in Flint, as really arising out of the Flint water crisis, and sort of the disability related consequences of that, and sort of the costs that it could impose on the city in the future, and the benefits to the affected kids of adequate response, basically. So I did a lot of research on that. I've done a decent amount of research into history of institutions that serve people with disabilities, specifically their sort of path to voting, and sort of the economics of those institutions in the pre-New Deal era, so like before 1920. I don't know that the history is going to be particularly applicable here, but perhaps most applicable, I worked in the Stanford Youth and Education Law Project for a quarter. That was like sort of my clinical experience, and the Youth and Education Law Project represents kids with disabilities primarily. It's an educational advocacy clinic, but all of my clients were younger students, middle school, elementary school, with disabilities, and we sort of advocated to get them accommodations or, you know, the equal treatment they are entitled under the IDEA. And we also worked on some bigger picture impact litigation cases where in one of the cases was there is a tribe in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, the Havasupai tribe, and they have sort of been struggling with being able to provide education to their students, because you can't, it's really remote. It's hardly accessible. You have to, it's a really long hike, or you have to get there by helicopter. There's no roads there. And so, as you can understand, like there's a lot of challenges that come with adequately educating the youth of that community. So those are just some of the things I worked on in law school. But perhaps more importantly than all of that for this podcast, I have lived for probably 19, almost 20 years as a brother of Shawn, who is quadriplegic, right? So it's been most of my life. I believe I was 5 or 6 when he got in his accident, and ever since then, it's been a huge part of my life. You know, just even with him and helping him out with the things that he needs, and sort of being involved in the disability community more broadly. I have a little bit of experience in that.
Absolutely. You know, I don't. You guys go ahead if you have something.
Well, I just have an important question. Did he ever try to run you over with his chair? That's really what I want to know.
Not only has he tried, he's succeeded several times. Thankfully, nothing more than a toe or a foot here or there. You know, no vital organs in the path.
Is that what motivated you to go into law right there? Because like,
Does he want to sue me?
yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler was one of the only people that I know that learned how to be able to stand on the back of my chair. So when we're in airports and public places and all these things, he would stand on the back caster wheels, and I'd just turn this baby up as fast as it goes, and we'd just be flying through places. And he's standing up and standing on it. Yeah, he was good at it. Most other people fall off as soon as you go, but he was fantastic at it.
Sounds like you're a thrill junkie.
Yeah, well, it is pretty nice, especially in the airport, because everybody gets out of the way, obviously. And I used to have to carry the bags, and so I'd be standing on his wheelchair, you know, with a bag in each hand behind me. It was quite the scene, but certainly better than me running, and certainly faster.
Oh yeah, because his chair's fast. He's got some speed going on in that thing.
I hit 7.6 miles an hour the other day.
You know, I just have this image of like this track and like tears coming out of your eyes and like the wind's blowing and you're just like
It's not all that different from some things that have happened. We've definitely taken it down some hills, and especially in the cold, you might start to tear up. Maybe not because of necessarily the speed, but and 7.6 miles an hour may not sound very fast to those of you who have not been in a wheelchair going 7.6 miles an hour, but it is quite the thrill. Faster than you would expect.
Yeah.
It gets real squirrely, real fast.
You start to get the little wobble, like when you're skateboarding, you get the little wobbles going down a hill, and that's usually a bad sign. And sometimes you see one of the back wheels start to jitter like that, and you just hold on and pray.
So has he ever taken like a left turn real quick while you're on the back, and you just kind of go the other way?
I don't remember falling off at any point, at least not because of a turn like that. I may have fallen other times, but nothing really sticks out. I've definitely seen him take some spills, and
really
glad I wasn't necessarily on the back for those. Maybe it would have been stability.
We've heard some of the stories, and they were hilarious. The dance floor and some other stories. But,
yeah.
Tyler is a brother of quadriplegic. I mean, did you see him any differently growing up, or did you just see him as your bro? Or, I mean, how did other kids see him and that sort of thing? I'm just curious your perspective.
First and foremost, he was always my brother. He was always the same person. And like we said, I was pretty young, 5 or 6, I think, when he got in his accident. So I definitely remember him a little bit before he was in the accident. But one thing to think about is I was really young when he was still in high school, and when he was off at college, I didn't really see him all that often. So I was always excited to see him, and we'd play video games and all that. And I guess one of the silver linings, at least for me, of all this was that it brought him, it made him a bigger part of my life. He was off at college and would have went off and gotten a job and all that. And he, I have another older brother, and I rarely see him, like once a year, maybe twice a year. So I couldn't imagine it being like that with Shawn. So I guess that was something that, like I said, it was a silver lining. Obviously, I wish it never had happened, but since it did, I look at the positives in that we have a much closer relationship than I think we ever would have had otherwise.
Yeah, and and one of the things too is, we have such a close dynamic in the fact that like we live together outside of the home, right? So we had an apartment together for a couple of years. Of 3 years, I think we had an apartment or a house, and then an apartment. We lived together. He helped me with a lot of care stuff, and he helped me through times in which people maybe didn't show up, or the other things of those sorts, in which he was there to be able to be a very big rock for me, and he's always been that for me, and so it's a blessing, for me, it's always been a blessing, I mean, the fact that he took it the way he did, and he really took to it, and it's something that not everybody does, and not everybody can see it that way, and he really took to it, and he never once ever made me feel like I was less of a person, which is, I mean, unbelievable, I mean, I think that has really shown in his personality as he's grown up too, I mean, and you can even see with the things that he does, I mean, as far as, with the law stuff that he's doing, and then studies and stuff that he's done, and the people that he's worked for. I mean, he's definitely taken to the life of individuals with disabilities, and looked towards how he can advocate and help, and that's awesome. It's fantastic.
So Tyler, what's next for you? Do you have anything lined up?
Well, next up is taking the bar exam. I'm going to be working in California, so I'm taking the California bar. Because of all the uncertainties of COVID, it's been delayed. It might get delayed further. It might get put online. It might get canceled altogether. I doubt that'll happen, though I certainly hope it will. They're advocating for something called the Paloma privilege. Basically, like in this public health emergency, lawyers are in high demand, right? Like there's a lot of things lawyers could be doing right now to help communities in need. And beyond COVID, like also with the like Black Lives Matter movement and all of that, there's a lot of more awareness of sort of communities in need more broadly, which includes people with disabilities. And we can talk about that later, but they are advocating for the bar to not be a requirement for newly graduated law students, and to just basically allow us to practice under the supervision of a attorney. Again, I'm not hopeful that I'm hopeful that'll happen. I don't think it will. So my next thing is taking the bar. After that, I do have a job lined up at a firm in Los Angeles. I'll be doing mostly antitrust, which is like competition between businesses and white collar crime work. But they're open to pro bono, and they've said that you can kind of do whatever you want. So I definitely plan to stay involved in the like disability community and disability advocacy, probably at the youth and education level, but we'll see what opportunities I can find for that.
Cool. So we can call you whenever we need help. Is that what we're hearing?
Once I pass the bar and actually am a lawyer, it'll probably be like you were saying earlier about not being a medical professional, but having access to a lot of resources. So that's the thing, is like my friends always say that, and I'm like, I certainly won't be qualified to represent you in a DUI or something like that case, but I probably know somebody who can, or would, be able to help you find somebody who could. But yeah.
I didn't know about his DUIs.
Just saying, that's what all my friends are like. So if I ever get pulled over,
Just a hunch.
You're my call from jail, and I'm like, I don't know if that's the smartest call, but I'll do my best.
Now, I know a lot of people who become lawyers also have the opportunity to take a political venue, such as congressmen, presidents, stuff like that. Are you shooting towards that path, or, I mean, should we start calling you Mr. President?
Certainly not. I used to be pretty interested in all that, but even just seeing how politics operate at like the school level. So like when I was in undergrad, one of my friends ran for like the undergraduate student body. He wasn't even like president. He was running for like treasurer. He was on the ticket basically. And there were like all these attack ads and all these things. It was just so nasty. And I was immediately turned off to all of it. And you like see since then, so I graduated in 2017, but like around that time, things started kind of going south in terms of like the integrity of politics, in my opinion. But anyways, that's a whole nother case. I am not particularly
that kind of leads. That's kind of leading a little bit.
I'm not interested in politics.
I don't blame you.
But
yeah.
I know a lot of people who are, and I mean, maybe in the future, but at this time, certainly not at all.
How was your experience at Stanford? Did you like it there?
Oh, it was fantastic. I could not have asked for a better situation. It was when I was in high school, like I always thought Stanford was cool, right? Because it's one of these elite schools, but it's not some stuffy Ivy League, Harvard, Yale, Princeton type of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I was always interested in it. I certainly was nowhere close to getting there to go to college after high school. I believe I got a rejection letter basically immediately after applying. So it was definitely a dream to, and I didn't even think I could get in there for law school, and I still probably think that I shouldn't have, but, it was fantastic. I jumped at the opportunity. Like I was trying to tell the dean when she called me to tell me that I got in, like where do I sign? Who do I pay my deposit to? Like, I'm ready to send this right now. But it was everything I hoped it could be and more. Such a fantastic place. The campus is beautiful. And more than anything, the student body there was really just astounding. It's a fairly small class, so each like class of law school has about 180 kids. So like 179 other kids graduated with me, give or take. And I have never met a more like intelligent, passionate, interesting, fun, any like positive thing you can think of. I cannot say enough positive things about my classmates, and I think that was probably the biggest part of what made law school such a great experience for me.
Nice. So you guys are going to change the world.
Say that again?
So you guys are going to change the world, is what I'm hearing.
So I actually visited a class at Arizona State Law School, and just before the class, the professor was like making fun of Stanford students, and didn't know that I was there. And so I introduced myself, and I was like, "Oh, well, I'm from Stanford." And he's like, "Oh, so you're here to change the world?" So funny you say that. That's definitely the impression. And like, I have no doubt that so many people from my graduating class will have huge impacts on the world. Like, I'm sure that you will hear about many of them. If not in the next few years, certainly down the line. They're, like I said, they are some of the brightest people I've ever met, and motivated people. And so they certainly will make their mark.
Well,
Cool.
including you, Tyler.
Yeah.
So you're going to make
Hopefully.
it as well, yes.
I'm going to put you in my speed dial right now.
So, you know, one of the things that you touched on earlier was the educational aspect of individuals with disabilities. In your experience, do you feel like individuals with disabilities at the level of, so you said middle schools, right? Do you feel like they get the same level of education as somebody without a disability?
I really think it depends a lot on circumstances, right? So, in disability type, right? So, if Shawn, if your accident would have happened when you were in high school, it would have been a struggle, but I think that you would have been able to access the curriculum in a way that, you know, was adequate under the law. Like, right, it would be like some accommodations that need to be made here and there, like physical accommodations, stuff like that, maybe some testing accommodations, that type of stuff. But, you know, you had solid family support. We're not at a particularly underfunded school district, and it probably would have worked for you. I can't say for sure, but, you know, that's not the case for everybody, right? Especially folks with or kids with learning disabilities and autism spectrum disorder and behavioral disabilities, or disabilities that manifest themselves behaviorally. It becomes a lot more difficult to sort of handle and provide those kids with an adequate education, especially as is the case in a lot of school districts, if the school is underfunded, right? So
You bring
I
up
know, Eric, you mentioned, oh, go ahead.
you bring up an aspect that I can really relate with too. You know, adequate support from family is so key in getting ahead or getting to where you need to go. And I find my wife is a special ed teacher, and one of the big things that she finds is when there is a lack of support from the family, that child has a harder time learning. You know, it's just because the support isn't there. So yeah. Anyways, please continue. I just wanted to throw that in.
Oh, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because yeah, it is such a big difference. And even in the like students that I've represented, that is honestly one of the biggest predictors of you know, how easy our job is as representing them. So just for example, like I've represented somebody who had Down syndrome, and it just had a single mother who, you know, worked several jobs and didn't have a lot of time to go to the school and advocate or volunteer in the classroom or,
Yeah.
even necessarily work on the schoolwork with her, right? And it was a struggle because in that case, we found that in like meetings with the school district, asking for accommodations or, more increased support, they would often sort of blame it on the parent, saying, well, more work could be done at home. And we're sitting there like, it's kind of your guys' job to educate her. And like, it's, what I mean? You can't make this perfect family life for her. She's kind of stuck with the circumstances she has. And we need more support on your guys' end to help with that. On the other hand, I've represented people or students that had families that were really, really supportive. And, they certainly weren't rich or anything, and they really weren't, right? But they had a circumstance that, it was a 2-parent household, and they had a little bit more flexibility in helping him sort of work with his school work and do behavioral supports that are like extracurricular. And in that case, the school could never say more could be done, more could be being done at home. And why aren't you guys, this slack could be picked up at home, because everybody knew that they were doing everything that you could ask for and more. Like, each of them worked, and I think his dad worked 2 jobs, right? And they still found the time to do that. And that's just a testament to them and their willingness to do that. But again, not everybody can do that, right? Not every student is blessed with parents who are financially able to do that, or not necessarily financially, but it's not everybody who can work 2 jobs and, provide all this education and behavioral support to a student with fairly severe needs.
Yeah,
So
they'll need
yeah,
injections of coffee and nicotine and to
I,
help them stay awake as they're teaching their kid after they've worked a double shift.
yeah, definitely. And the parents who can do that are saints and miracles as far as I'm concerned. But you can't necessarily hold it against parents who can't, right? Because everybody's circumstances are different. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because family is such a huge part of that. And not everybody has like family support, and it's sort of, how can we set up the system and get them the accommodations they need to guarantee them that equal opportunity at education.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I mean, I can even speak from experience of, when I got my accident, I had just finished my freshman year of college, and the transition from going from that to being disabled to back into an educational realm, or going back to college. I don't know. I don't think personally I would have been able to do that without the support of my family. Like, I mean, they were the ones who were taking me to school, right? Like, driving me. They were the ones who were there to help me and write my papers, or help me with all the things that I needed to do, and also to give me the motivation to better myself. And I think that it is. I mean, it's a major key in your quality of life. It's a major key in your access to all these different educational tools and all these different things, like to better your life. Your family structure plays a huge part of
I absolutely agree.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had, my family, even my mother and father were separated. However, they came from large families. So grandma and grandpa were involved, uncles and aunts were involved, to help me when I needed it. And so I had a very strong family support as well. Don, what about you?
Well, yeah, I had great family support as well, and I could have made it without them. But one of my thoughts was, and Tyler, maybe you were too young to remember this, but I think for people with disabilities, there's so many roadblocks that are in the way to get the supports that we need. And I'm just curious if you remember seeing Shawn have to jump through all those hoops and struggle to get accommodations he needed, or get whatever programs he needed, and if that left a mark with you?
I think I was a little young, and sort of when he was going back to college, that was fairly removed from sort of my involvement in his life in terms of the administrative side of things like that. I think it would have been probably a little closer to home had he gotten his accident during high school, because he would have been coming home every day and all of that. But for me, it was basically like when he went out to college, I would talk to him on the phone every once in a while. We'd see him maybe once a week. But I was never really involved in any of that.
Okay. The reason,
so that's why, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, well, the reason I said that, like I got injured right before college. And so I had to learn kind of how to live with a disability my freshman and sophomore years of college. And so for me, I just remember while my friends and colleagues were studying or out socializing or whatever, I was trying to figure out who was going to get me up in the morning, or who was going to help me with my bowel program, or how I was going to get my wheelchair repaired. And it really affected my ability to be a student the first, at least for a couple of years, and then just jumping through the hoops of getting, the caregiving paid for, all, Social Security and all those things. And it just seems to me, I'm just curious if you remember that with Shawn. I'm sure Shawn had to go through similar things. He's nodding his head. And, it seems like the supports are still hard to get. And I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, even though we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of the ADA this month. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So I'm glad you have an interest, at least, in some disability law.
Yeah, I mean,
no, go ahead.
You go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, yeah, it was like a big part of sort of why I considered going to law school in the first place. It's like what I wrote my application essay about. And it's immediately, once I got in, I was talking to the disability law professor, who's been a great mentor to me. Not 2 weeks goes by where I'm not in her office or talking to her. And so it's definitely been a big constant in my law school experience. And it's been great. And it's really introduced me to so many things that I didn't know anything about, right? As Shawn's brother, he's physically disabled. And I never had to deal with sort of him trying to get accommodations in high school and all that stuff. And taking disability law and getting involved in youth advocacy sort of showed me the whole other side of disability, which is, mental, developmental, behavioral disabilities, and sort of how kids in school have to handle those, and the importance of education for those students, because it really can change their lives. And you can see, even like when the youth and education law clinic that I worked for gets involved in cases, like there's times where students are not expected, are basically written off as always going to be dependent and will basically be conserved and all of that. And it's sometimes when we get involved, we can say, they're just actually, you guys aren't even looking at this right at all. Like they have this, like, you guys have been trying to teach him English Sign Language, and he's actually proficient in Arabic Sign Language. And so, like, yeah, he doesn't know what you're talking about because you're speaking a different language. Right. And then we can help get those kids into college placements and all of that. And it's been really fulfilling or inspiring to see all of that, honestly, and just to see how basically see the breadth of disability law and how big of an impact it can have on people's lives. And I've really only worked in education advocacy, right? Like there's so many other fields that also have just as consequential outcomes for the people involved. And that's one thing that going to law school, even after having been involved in the disability community, like I said, for 20 years, it's hard to ever fully grasp how much is out there.
It sounds like you have growing up and seeing diversity as you have with Shawn, who's actually quite different than you, it seems.
In a couple of ways.
What are you trying to say, Eric?
I'm just
Right.
saying that. That's all I'm saying.
What do you mean? Speak freely here, Eric. Come on.
Well, what I'm saying is, I grew up with my brother as well, and we were only 11 months apart. And one of the things that I've noticed about my brother as well that I'm seeing with you is that the glasses of seeing people differently is kind of not there as much. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, someone has a disability, but what do they have? It's not just oh, I'm scared, I've never encountered this before. And I've run into a lot of people like that, I've never been around someone who has a disability, or I've never been around someone who has this or that, and it seems like, you just grew up with it, so now you're just like, oh, well, this is just what it is, and you're able to see the differences, but it's more encompassing. You're able to integrate all that into your worldview, it seems, which is cool, which is very cool, because right there it gives you a leg up, because you're able to see a broader scope of humanity. Not that I'm trying to get preachy or anything.
No, I think you're dead on with that, Eric. I mean, I think that's something too, like that I've noticed so much about him, especially, is that he is so open to everyone, no matter what the difference that human being has, right? I mean, like, he advocates for everyone, whether black, brown, disabled, anything, right? I mean, he advocates for all of it, and that's something that I definitely look up to. I mean, I know that's something that even from I wasn't around a lot of that stuff when I was younger, so I didn't know, like, I didn't grow up that way, right? So like he did, and you can see it in the way that he acts, the way that he cares for people, the way like all that stuff it encompasses in the fact that I think that he was put into that situation, and he sees it, and he understands it, and he fully is aware of it, and takes it in, and it has made it part of his life.
Yeah, kudos to you. seriously, it's seriously a leg up in this world that's gone chaotic and kittywampus all over the place. I mean, you'll be the voice of, you have the potential to be the voice of reason in a chaotic world. So that, no pressure.
I feel a lot of pressure, but I think that's a good thing. Keeps
well,
you,
you know what?
pressure from all sides keeps you straight on the path.
See, and this is where you call me, because I deal with pressure. So I'm a social worker, and I deal with mindfulness. So you call me when you get stressed out, and I'll help you. I'll help talk you down. Okay, so we gotta
I
all support
appreciate
each
that.
other here. That way, when I have to give you a call someday, you'll say, oh yeah, okay. So we're just.
I do owe you one, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I'm saying. We just gotta figure that out.
So Tyler, no plans to come back to Arizona or go to Michigan? You're gonna stay in California?
I'm only thinking a couple years at a time. I'm going to be in California for at least a little while. I could definitely see coming back to Michigan or Arizona at some point. I just got back to Michigan today, and I forgot how much I love it here, at least in the summer. But there's
you don't like the winters?
Not so much. After going to school in Arizona for so long and living in California for 3 years, snow is kind of foreign to me these days, and I'm not super upset about it. And I could definitely keep it that way, and be perfectly happy. I can take a little trip somewhere if I need to see some, but
Right.
not something I feel like I need right now.
Well, I kind of want to get into a topic with you. There's a lot of people out there that have siblings and or loved ones that are disabled, and they sometimes feel lost, right? They sometimes feel overwhelmed. They sometimes feel like they don't know what to do or how to help, right? Is there anything from your experiences that you could say, or even just give some type of advice, or even just maybe even talk about how maybe you've dealt with these situations that maybe somebody could take and use?
I guess my first piece of advice is to sort of listen to the person you're trying to care for and help out, and figure out what they actually need, right? It's a lot of times people will be asking for something small, but it will sort of be a result of a bigger thing. And even if they can't articulate that, or they don't know it themselves, they haven't realized that. I would say that's the biggest thing, because as you all know, disability is a highly individualized thing, right? Like no two disabilities are the same. Even two C4 quadriplegics can have wildly different needs and abilities, right? So I think the first place you should look is with the person that you're trying to help. Second is, I guess, don't necessarily expect them to have all the answers, right? Especially if it's like a child, like your child, or a family member. They don't know anything more about the community than you do. If like it's something that happened to everybody. Sorry. So when you get in an accident, it happens to everybody at once, right? Just because, Shawn, like you found yourself in a wheelchair doesn't mean you know everything about being in a wheelchair. And I couldn't expect you to tell me all those things. There's certain things that you could obviously tell me, but there's a lot of things that, you know, I couldn't expect you to do for me. There's a lot of work that could be done that wasn't on you to teach me. And so I guess the second thing is, after you sort of talk to the person you're trying to help with and understand them more deeply, is learn more, right? There's a lot of resources online. Eric, like you've been talking about all the resources that you have. So reach out to those organizations that help folks with disabilities broadly, or the
Yep.
particular disability that the person you're trying to help has, and sort of learn more. And maybe you can do that work of learning and pass that on to the person you're trying to help, right? Like I've often tried to learn stuff about spinal cord injuries and, you know, disability in general, that like I've tried to share with Shawn, because it shouldn't all be on him to sort of go collect all that information, figure it out how to teach me about it, and then put in the work of actually teaching me about it, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Good answer, man.
I think too, as far as, relationship stuff goes too, I mean, when you're talking about when you're in a position where you have to provide care for a person too, right? I mean, that can alter the relationship between the humans, that you necessarily, that stressor wouldn't necessarily be there if you didn't have to rely on them, and I know that there has been times in our relationship, especially when we lived together in Tempe for those years, in which, my disability was a major stressor upon you, because you felt as if you were required to help me because you're my family member and you're my brother and you love me, right? How did you kind of get through some of that without cussing me out and getting angry? Because you really have never done that. You've never been that kind of person, and you've always taken it so well. I mean, I guess I'm asking, how you kind of internally dealt with that.
Sure. So I can give a little background on what he's talking about. So, like you mentioned earlier, we lived together in what would have been my junior and senior year of college. Um, so I went to school at ASU in Phoenix, and Shawn had previously lived in Tucson. And there were a lot of reasons why Shawn wanted to be in Phoenix. So like going up there was beneficial for him, but my family wasn't in a position to move up there for that, and I was already up there. I had benefits of him coming up there. Like I could, it would help with the rent. Obviously, like we could get a place, and it would be a little easier than trying to find other roommates, stuff like that. Like it was a mutually beneficial thing in theory, right? So once he got up there, like he had some nurses. So the deal was basically like I would put him in bed, Sunday through Thursday night, I think it was 4 nights a week, during the week when I was at home, doing schoolwork type of stuff. And then he would have people work on the weekends and during the mornings. I never really had to do the morning work. So it went well, but at some point it started feeling like I was sort of tied down in a way, right? At least that's what it felt like, because other people had jobs, sure, but they could ask for time off. They could, call out sick, and it wouldn't be a big deal, right? Like if you work at a shoe store, they're going to be just fine if you don't show up because they have a bunch of other people who could do it. And like if they have one less person, it's fine, not a big deal. But if I wanted to not show up to work, it means Shawn couldn't go to bed, right? He's got to sleep in his chair, and that's obviously not okay. And like other stuff too, like it would not be good. I couldn't just call in. I had to be there. And so there were a lot of times on weeknights where I wanted to go do stuff, but it's not even that I couldn't do it. I just had to like take the time to help him, and I was always sort of required to do that, which is fine. But after a while, he sort of didn't have anybody else to work those weekend nights, and there was a stretch of time where I was working every single night, and that was a lot for me, right? Like I'm a junior in college trying to have a social life, but I am required to be at home, and at that time we lived like 30-40 minutes away from campus.
And
So
that's the hub
I
of
was
life.
required to say that again.
That's the hub of college life too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I would, come home from school, come home from class, but like my friends would be hanging out, and it's like, well, I have to go home. I have to help Shawn get dinner, and then I have to help him get in bed, and that's a large portion of the day. And it's sort of doing that 7 days a week really cut down on what I was able to do socially, and that was a struggle for me. Eventually, we found some more stable people, and it, you know, uh, eased a little bit. But there was a while where it felt like a ball and chain in a way.
Sure.
It's not necessarily right. I'm not proud that I thought that, but that's how I felt in the moment.
Natural. Man. That's
You
a
know,
natural feeling.
Yeah, that is a natural feeling. I'm, when you have family members that
Well, and
are,
I'm guessing conversely, Shawn, sometimes you felt like a ball and chain to Tyler. He felt like
Yeah.
you were holding him down as
I
well.
mean, I felt, I felt the same way. I felt awful about him not being able to experience some of the things that maybe he should have or could have, and because of me, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing for many people in this world, in this world of people with disabilities or individuals with disabilities. So many people feel that same way, so you shouldn't feel bad. You shouldn't have negative feelings about having that go through you, because that is the process, part of the process, like I think everybody has that.
that you're able to speak to that too shows a real integrity, because some people don't even know how to don't even feel comfortable to speak about this, because when you have a disability, the last thing you want to do is be a burden on someone. That's something we all anyone who has a disability recognizes that right away. They're like, oh my God, I have to have this person. I have to have someone in my life. And I can tell you, it's not a comfortable feeling. However, that you're able to speak to it means that you are able to have a dialogue with that. And that sometimes really can change the dynamics. For example, when you guys found that other person, that when you worked with your schedule to relieve your schedule a little more, to be able to do more of what you wanted to do, how did that come about? Did you guys have a conversation? What did you guys do?
I mean, I think eventually it was, I'm not gonna say it got to a boiling point because there was never any like one point about that, but it was sort of, I tried to make clear that this wasn't really the arrangement, that, I was 20 years old or 21 years old trying to have a normal college life. And like, because I was benefited, right? Like I didn't have to pay rent. I guess I like paid my rent through working and helping him, right? But like I said, it just wasn't really what I had signed up for and like what we had agreed to. And so I think it was sort of like a series of like microaggressions back and forth, because we hadn't really had that discussion fully. It was like I would mention something about that, and it would be like, well, you don't have to pay rent. And it's like, well, this is, what I mean, back and forth, stuff like that. Eventually, we were able to sort of come to that understanding of like, this is not like something needs to change, right? Like, or we're going to end up hating each other. Because you're going to like Shawn would think that I am like not grateful for what he's doing for me, and I would, like we talked about, view him as preventing me from having as normal an experience as I could. And eventually, I think we were able to sort of have a meeting of the minds and like understand each other on that point. And it's not even necessarily that was like he decided for me to have to work every day, right? It was just that we couldn't find anybody else to do it, which is a huge problem for a lot of people, right? And Shawn, I think you were lucky that you had an alternative, because I think a lot of people who didn't have something to fall back on would have been in a lot worse of a situation, right? If an 8 or 2 quits unexpectedly and you're sort of left out to dry, like what do you do in that situation? I don't know. Like, thankfully you had a buffer, and it still took several weeks to figure out. Like, it was a while.
Longer than that.
And yeah, it was maybe a couple months.
Several weeks, yeah.
I guess I don't really remember, but it shows how hard this can be for even somebody with, the resources to, hire a nurse. Like it wasn't an issue that like you didn't have enough money to pay a nurse. It was that you just like could not find a person who would come there and do the work for you.
Responsible.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and the thing is if we had somebody who wasn't going to show up, which like wasn't even really something that we could find then either, like there was no other option. But if you did have somebody who wasn't responsible, I would be out doing something and I might not be in a position to come back and help you. And what happens then? So, I mean, thankfully we were able to figure it out, but it shows how hard it is for a lot of people.
I think too, that's a problem that kind of plagues a lot of us, is that once we start relying on somebody, it's hard to change that, right? Like it's hard to like, okay, like let me go proactively find other people to do it when I already have somebody to do it, right? Like, so then you end up just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing on it. And then it's more, they adds more and adds more. And eventually, that stress or that responsibility and that stress just becomes too much, right? I mean, I think it works with relationships. I think it works with caregiving. I think it works with everything,
You brought up some really good points about what it is to have a caregiver and to be a caregiver and to fill that role. I mean, you're his brother and you also had a dual role of being his caregiver. And that's not an easy job. That's not easy to just, especially at a young age, that's not easy to play both roles like that, and I can see where that would be very difficult. But also, I mean, this is a dynamic that a lot of people who have disabilities that rely on people are having to deal with. I mean, I've talked to people who have laid in bed for months because they didn't have adequate care. They didn't have adequate ability to have themselves be helped. And I mean, it's so, yeah. So, kudos to both of you, first of all, because I mean, really, Tyler and Shawn, you guys worked it out. You had communication. Even if it did get to a boiling point, part of the communication is talking it out anyways, right? And you guys made it work. You guys figured it out. But I definitely see that there's some social dynamics in the world that make it very difficult, for this to happen. They don't pay caregivers very much in the first place. So it's not what you would call an attractive field to be in, but it's a very necessary field. It's a very necessary field. In fact, I believe they're considered essential workers.
They are.
Absolutely, for sure.
So it's one of those things where if you could do your lawyer skills and get caregivers more pay, that would be good.
There you go.
I'm just saying, just change the world. I'm just saying, change the world. That's all I'm saying.
Job one.
I don't know if a caregivers union would work in everybody's favor.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's the only thing we learned. If you want higher wages, you got to unionize. But I think that there are some other issues that arise with that.
And there's always the other aspect. Someone's got to pay. So
Mhm.
it's usually the conversations on one side or the other, but it's hard to meet in the middle for this sort of thing. So
Right. It's because there is no, like, I mean, there is, I don't mean to say that there is no, but there's certainly not enough funding for this type of thing, right? Like, most people who need caregivers aren't really in a position to pay lavish wages, right?
Yeah.
And the companies that pay caregivers, aren't really, maybe if they're in a position, even if they're in a position to do it, they don't want to, and they don't necessarily have to. They
they're
feel because,
reimbursed by insurances.
yeah, and the insurance companies don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, and they give, depending on which insurance company you have, depends on so everyone has a standard rate of pay. There's a national standard rate of pay, and the insurance companies, they go, well, we'll pay 50% of that because this is a state insurance, or we'll pay 80% of that because it's a private insurance, just as an example. Very much like auto glass, to tell you the truth. It's the same thing.
We could go down a rabbit hole with that, but
yeah, we really could
go down that one. Don, do you have anything that you wanted to add into as far as when we were talking about relationships and the burdens that sometimes we can be on those relationships?
Yeah, no, I think you guys hit it pretty well. I mean, definitely there's both sides of that equation. The person with the needs often feels like a burden and doesn't want to cause resentment. And you see it from the other side. The caregiver, sometimes feels kind of trapped in that situation, especially if they're a family member. So yeah, I mean, it's amazing you guys worked it out the way you did. I love seeing the brotherly love here. It makes me feel good, and just I'm so impressed with you guys and all you've been through. And thank you. I mean, I really appreciate you coming in and talking to us, Tyler, about some really personal things. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Yeah,
of course.
I think we're running short on time here, aren't we? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate you more than words can even express. I mean, and you've helped me, and I've learned so much. I've learned so much from you. I'm so proud of you. And I hope that our relationship continues to be as strong as what it is. I mean, that's the way I feel about it, at least.
I just met you. I'm proud of you. You're very
I'm glad to hear
that. Very eloquent young man. So you'll do fine. Good luck to you in the future.
I hope so.
And you are related to Shawn, right? I mean, this is true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you know what?
Barely.
No, you know what? I can actually see it kind of in you guys' eyes. You guys have similar eyes.
Do you like MMA too, or not, Tom?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Shawn definitely got me into that when he lived with us, and that's definitely stuck around.
Yeah. Did he teach you any moves?
Related.
Oh, I've taken him to so many different ones. We've been to a lot of different ones. I mean, we've traveled. We've been to Houston together to see fights.
Nice.
He knows so many, UFC fighters and MMA fighters all because of it, and it's something that we definitely bond over. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, anyways, look, I know we're running short on time. Tyler, you got anything you want to say at all before we head out?
I guess like you said, man, I'm definitely appreciative of you too. I know it's in we're talking about this sort of caregiver relationship, but beyond that, I mean, maybe it encompasses that a little bit, but maybe caregivers have, I mean, they definitely have a lot to learn from the people that they're helping. But I mean, in terms of just being my brother, man, I wouldn't be in this situation if this had never happened. So I don't know where I would be without it. And thank you.
I love you, man. Thank you.
You guys are great.
Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Anytime.
All right. Hey, Podriplegics, hit subscribe, hit like, send a comment. Tell Tyler how amazing he is. And tell Eric that you're going to sue him, please.
Jeez.
I don't think he swore.
Now, one time.
I should try swearing now because you keep throwing the bus at me. Good Lord.
Not one time. Look, man, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate all you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing you guys again next week or the week after. Tyler, thank you again, man. Love you.
Thank you
so much. Appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
We out.
Peace.
You done recording?